Welcome to Exploring the Role of AI in Education and the Workplace.
We're two classroom teachers on a mission to make artificial intelligence less intimidating and more inspiring for educators everywhere.
Whether you're just curious about what AI can do or already experimenting with it in your classroom, this podcast is your space to explore, to learn, and to grow.
Each episode features a two-part format. First, we sit down with industry experts to unpack a key aspect of AI, from infrastructure and ethics to creativity and integration.
Then we bring it back to the classroom with a boots on the ground segment, real conversations with educators who are actively using AI with students.
We'll bring you practical insights, honest dialogue, and real-world examples to help you think critically and creatively about the role of AI in teaching and learning.
I'm Georgia Terlahi, a former K-5 instructional coach and classroom teacher, and an educator who's passionate about tech integration and sparking curiosity in students.
And I'm Jessica Pack, a middle school teacher, education author, and former California Teacher of the Year. My passion is creating compelling learning experiences.
So let's dive in and discover how AI can empower educators and transform classrooms, one episode at a time.
Well, today we are so excited to have some incredible guests joining us to talk about the impact of AI and STEM careers. Today, we are going to have several guests with us. We're going to let them do the heavy lifting of introducing themselves. So if we could maybe begin, could you briefly introduce yourself and explain the context in which you work? Nitin, can we start with you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Nitin Ramachandran, and I have the pleasure and privilege of leading the Global Data and AI program at 3M. So my role spans, the ensuring that we have the right strategies at 3M as far as leveraging data and AI to drive innovation, as well as, education and business outcomes within the company.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining us today. And Jing as well, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jing Shen, 16 years with PepsiCo. Currently, my role is to leading an AI machine learning team to make sure we have the best AI solution for R&D.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here. We know both of you are so very busy, so we appreciate you taking the time. To get started, how is artificial intelligence changing the day-to-day work of professionals, especially we're thinking of STEM and creative fields? And we'd like to have both of you answer this, but can we start with you, Jing?
Sure. Thank you for the question. First of all, we're using AI every day. In PepsiCo, everybody is using Microsoft Copilot for our daily job. Especially I use it to search for whatever the information from my emails, SharePoints, even meeting recordings. It's much faster. I have to say this efficiency is very, very impressive. For our developers, we use vibe coding, for example, Copilot GitHub. We use these AI assistant tools to do the programming work. I don't have a specific metrics, but I could say based on my experience, the work usually in the past could easily take 1 hour or a couple of hours. Now it's just a couple of minutes. So that's how we use AI.
Nitin, how about you at 3M? How is it changing careers at 3M?
Well, it's changing it significantly, right? And not just at 3M, but if you look broadly, right, I think the biggest impact has been how AI is elevating human creativity, right? So when we think about, I know Jing spoke about this as well, about the efficiency piece, right? The first part of it is there's just a lot of mundane work that we do on a day-to-day basis, managing our emails, managing our calendars, preparing presentations, summarizing a meeting, things of that nature, right? So there's the first part of, I think, how AI is changing the day-to-day work is all of that mundane work is going away. AI is taking over most of that workload. The second part, again, very similar to what Jing had alluded to around vibe coding, right? So the time it takes to go from an idea in your head to something that you can see, touch, feel has been reduced significantly, right? You can translate, and I was in a call yesterday with the CFO of the company, and he was just outlining what he wanted. And as he was talking, I was able to use an AI assistant to show him what a potential, kind of product could look like, right? So there's that second piece, and I think the third part of that creative piece is, we're seeing AI elevate human thinking. So, we talk about AI quite a bit from a perspective of automation, but there's a whole piece of around how AI can be a thought partner with you, right? So, probably 80% of how I leverage AI assistants and how I see people leverage AI assistants at 3M is thinking with AI. So I have a meeting that I need to go in with. Can you help me? Like, what questions might be asked? Review this presentation and tell me what gaps might be there, or or other use cases like that. So there's a whole aspect of thinking with AI and elevating, human thinking. So I think in summary, it's about, you don't have to do a lot of the mundane work that you used to do, right? You're able to move much faster. You're able to ideate much faster, and you're able to elevate your thinking much faster. So that's fundamentally transforming, every employee's day to day at 3M.
That's so great to hear you speak about how much AI is contributing as a thought partner and being able to help you analyze your own work and find those weaknesses in whatever it is you're creating so that you can iterate a better version. That's pretty much what we're trying to do in the classroom as well. Which STEM career pathways at like your company do you see being transformed the fastest by AI? And what other new sort of career opportunities just anywhere in the field are you seeing emerging? Nathan, can we start with you?
Yeah, for sure. And Jing already spoke to this earlier with a career in research, right? 3M is an innovation company at heart. And so I'd say the researcher side of it, the R&D side of the house, is being transformed significantly, right? Especially some of the pieces around when you're trying to innovate, you have to go back, read up patents, read up scientific literature, which takes a huge amount of time. All of those activities, kind of are now run, with AI. So we're seeing a significant transformation in that innovation, research and development kind of space. The other space that's been impacted heavily is, kind of the software technology side of it, right? Because a lot of pieces around the technology side is very logical, and it's very sequential, step by step kind of process when you're writing code, for example. That is the other area that we are kind of seeing a significant, kind of change. So especially with STEM, I think those are two spaces at 3M that we're seeing a significant kind of transformation around.
And Jing, anything to add from PepsiCo?
Yeah, so I want to build on top of what Nathan shared. Definitely software engineer, that is one area with a big impact. But there's an emerging role we call AI engineer. This role, I don't think there's such name in the past. At least 5 years ago, I never heard about anybody's hiring AI engineer, but now it's in high demand. So this role is kind of combination between data science and a software engineer and a cloud engineer. At least my team is hiring this role, and we do need this new talent because this talent has all kinds of skills. It's a new combination. So that's something I want to highlight. I know there's some role is disappearing, but there's a new role is emerging.
That's I'm so glad you bring up a new actually position that maybe people haven't heard of, because in this podcast we really are trying to bridge the gap with educators and the industry, because educators, have boots on the ground trying to raise up this, new group of students that will be coming to you in the workforce. And so thinking about that, what kind of human skills do you think are going to be most needed in an AI-driven workforce that teachers could be working on right now? What would be useful in either of your industries? Nathan, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll start maybe with kind of kind of a framing statement around maybe as I was coming through my career, like how we would think through it and how that's fundamentally changed, right? I mean, going through my career, there was always this piece around how can you become a T-shaped individual, right? Deep specialization in a space, and then, kind of this breadth of experience in applying that specialization in different areas, right? And that's how I think, at least, kind of cohorts that kind of like, that grew their careers, during the time that I grew up, we thought about it that way. That is fundamentally changed right now, right? And this goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is the time between an idea to getting that idea, into a working solution has reduced significantly. It's taken from months and years to, like, minutes and days now, right? So as we start thinking about the next 10 years in a world that is impacted by AI, um, the biggest piece around it is going to be the ability to ideate faster. The creative thinking is going to be the differentiator, right? You can see that even today. You can put an AI assistant in the hands of Jing as well as myself, give us the same problem, and we will come up with different solutions. That's not because of AI. That's because of how Jing and I are interacting with AI and how we're ideating with AI. So the first part is, I think that education has been pretty much focused on logical reasoning and critical reasoning, and I think that is shifting a little bit more towards abstract reasoning and critical reasoning, right? So that logical piece will be taken over kind of from an AI perspective, as we go through the next 10 years. Now, I think I'm going to caveat all of this by saying the fact that the tools we use today didn't exist like 3 years back, right? So 10 years is a very long time to think through, right? But I think we can safely say that, a lot of the work that it takes to go from idea to a solution is going to, all of that mundane work is going to be eliminated with AI. So the differentiator is going to be how creative you can be. The second part, I think, as we think about skills, is going to be the ability to learn quickly, the ability to learn with projects, right? And with AI, you can apply that on a day-to-day basis, right? I have an 8-year-old boy, and like, I sat down with him and we built this thing called Dad Bucks with AI, so that like, he could manage his allowances. But you can take little things around you, like, how do I build a grocery list? How do I organize my toys? You can pick any idea you want, but there's that experiential learning piece, that has to come through. And I think, that's going to be a significant skill that students need to develop as we look through the next 10 years. A lot of creative thinking and the ability to look around you and learn by taking the very simple things around you in an experiential fashion.
And that's such a big shift for education as well.
Mhm.
I mean, you mentioned the logical piece, but so much curriculum is very just sort of linear. And so it is going to take a shift, and hopefully it shifts fast enough to catch up with what is needed. Jing, did you have anything to add about, like, what human skills do you think are going to be important, even if it's just like in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, that is a great question. Nowadays, AI is very powerful. So, as a human, how to differentiate us from AI, and human skill is going to be equally or even more important than the technical skill. So, to build on top of Nitin, first of all, Nitin covered pretty much everything. Very good. The learning part, I have to say, besides quick learning, we also need to quick unlearn some stuff, some outdated stuff we need to quickly unlearn. That is not easy, especially we build some habit and how to unlearn. That's a learning thing. The second one I want to highlight is we should help students to build a very healthy skepticism, because AI is very good at creating answer, but AI has hallucination. So how to help students, instead of blindly trust, accept whatever AI gives us, how to validate, cross-check the results, and building up their own logic. So that's something I want to add on. The last one is asking the right question in the right way is even more important nowadays, because AI is good at giving the answer, but asking question is how to differentiate between us.
These are all such great ideas for how we can kind of change the trajectory of what we're doing with students in the classroom. So thank you very much for this conversation. What misconceptions do students and educators often have about AI and its impact on future jobs? Because we hear a lot in like the staff lounge, right, of teachers being sort of afraid of AI. And then we also hear from parents as other stakeholders in our education community where they're maybe a little apprehensive. So, what would you say about misconceptions that students or educators might have about AI and its impact on future jobs? Jing, can we start with you?
Sure. This is another great question. Thanks for asking. I think nowadays we are too over emphasize the negative part of AI instead of creating this anxiety because everybody is like a fear. Instead of providing this kind of anxiety, why not just help students to build up the right positive way to embrace it because it's coming. No matter you like it or not, it's coming. So let's face it how to embrace it and how to help this AI on the right track. Because whatever AI is giving us is based on whatever we provide AI. So we need to help AI to be on the right track and build up something which is positive to our human being. That's something I want to emphasize.
Yeah,
Good.
absolutely. No, I think you framed that really well, Jing. I think that just like every technology revolution has happened, we always sit down and say, "Oh, this time it's different," right? And yes, it is a little bit different with AI, but I think if you kind of think about it more from an economic sense, right, there's a lot of value that's being created. Just like we had the digital revolution, the mobile revolution, right? While it changed, when mobile came through, it affected the telephone operator, so to speak, right? I mean, so we had all of those impact points, right? We said like email would affect postal, right? And so, but if you kind of look today, we still have flight services, we still have postal services, and new jobs have been created, right? So I think as we look through the air, we're very early. Like I think if you kind of think about AI, it's only had about, let's say, a year and a half to play out. If you think about it in terms of companies and people actually starting to leverage AI on a day-to-day basis, and so I think there's a little bit of exuberance in the market, so to speak, in terms of the narrative around jobs and AI. The reality is, are the jobs that existed, let's say, a year back, going to exist, 5 years or 10 years from now? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that new jobs will not be created. Jing alluded earlier to, kind of the AI engineer, the AI translator. A big part of what's going to come through is safeguards and guardrails in the use of AI. There's going to be roles and newer roles in the space of cybersecurity that are going to come through. There are business roles that are going to be around AI ideation and vibe coding and pieces like that. So there's significant new roles that'll be created. So yes, there is an aspect of AI automation, but it's in my view, and as Jing said as well, it's not all doom and gloom. I think there is a reframing of kind of what we would look at or how we would define a job, so to speak.
If you could give one piece of advice to today's middle school, high school, college students about preparing for their future with STEM careers, what would that advice be?
Yeah, I'll give you an analogy to kind of think about, right? When we kind of brought in calculators into the classroom, right, that did not eliminate the need to teach students basic math, multiplication, division, addition, algebra, all of those pieces. We took students through learning the basics and the foundations so that they understood how the math worked. And once we felt they knew that, we put a calculator into their hands and then allowed them to use that, right? It's kind of the same kind of effect with AI, right? I think what I see, happening around when people start leveraging AI is as Jing mentioned earlier as well, it's not just about asking the right questions, it's about verifying the output, right? My biggest concern around education is kids think that, oh, AI is there, I don't need to pay attention to the foundations and the fundamentals. The reality is you still need to understand that. Like, for example, in software engineering, you still need to understand how code is written to ensure that, AI is not writing code that is wrong. In a researcher space, you still need to understand how scientific equations are written to ensure that, the right innovation is happening. So my biggest advice to kids, I have an 8-year-old as well, and like, I actually restrict him from using like a Google or an Amazon or an AI tool because he's at such a young age, right? And my advice to all the kids is focus on learning the fundamentals, focus on doing things by hand, focus on writing things down rather than just speaking to an AI bot. Because those are all things that allow you to cognitively learn and store information and organize information. And then you can start, kind of leveraging AI, but you still have to there's still old school learning that needs to happen.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Maybe I just add several. First one is I want all the kids and students stay curious, because curiosity is the number one motivation for me to learn new things. So stay curious. And the second one is pursue the passion, interest, and keep searching for their strength, because everyone has different strength. What's their strengths? Keep identifying the strength. And the last one is invest in the human quality, the empathy, compassion, nurture some good taste. I don't think these things AI could have, but a human has. So that's something I want to advise, provide for students.
All of it, excellent advice. Even in, for 20 years ago, it was old school teaching, but it's a great way to wrap this up. We want to thank you both so much for joining this conversation today. I think it's just kind of a great window, especially for educators, to listen to people in the industry, because sometimes we get so isolated in education, we forget why we're doing what we're doing for the outside world, if that makes sense. So we appreciate your contribution today. Before we go, would you mind briefly sharing, if listeners wanted to reach out to you with any questions, where could they reach you? Nathan, where could listeners find you?
Yeah, the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. Usually respond, quite often to kind of people who reach out on LinkedIn. So that's the best way to reach me.
Yeah, same here.
Thank you, Jing. I know LinkedIn has become like the new place, the new social workplace place. So thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having both of us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Now that we've heard from the experts, it's time to take it to the classroom.
This is our Boots on the Ground segment, where we talk with real educators doing the real work with AI right alongside their students.
Let's hear how AI is making a difference in schools today.
We are joined by Dr. Mark Covell and Jesse Lubinsky. Thank you for joining us to share your expertise.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Georgia, Jessica, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Could you introduce yourself and just kind of give us a brief rundown on the context in which you work?
Sure, no problem. So my name is Dr. Mark Covell. I'm the proud director at Middle Bucks Institute of Technology. So that's a career and technical center right in the heart of Bucks County, Pennsylvania. We serve 4 member school districts, 9 sending high schools, and we are teaching high school students the trades, 21 different trade areas in 5 different career clusters. And I don't have to tell you, but I'll just remind everybody that CTE is incredibly hot right now. We are coming off of one of the most prolific application phases we've ever had. So we had nearly double the number of applicants that we had seats available. And so it's a sign of the times, no doubt, that CTE is where folks are interested in the educational space. And I'm excited to have this conversation and talk a little bit more about the work you do and how maybe it intersects with the work that I do.
My name is Jesse Lubinsky. I have been in education, for over 2 decades. Every time I say that, I feel so weird about it. I was a classroom teacher for nearly a decade. Then I moved into administration, and I was the director of technology innovation for another like 12 years ish. And then I left the classroom, or left school, to co-found an ed tech startup called Ready Learner One, where we focused on emerging technologies and how to, accelerate timelines of adoption within schools. And I always say to people, there's never a better time to leave your safe career in education and jump into a startup than right before a global pandemic. It's like the best career advice I can give is maybe don't do that. And now I am a principal education evangelist at Adobe, which I feel like is a whole separate conversation in and of itself. That title is a lot. But I always say that basically it's an easy way. It's a nice way of saying my team are the ones who get to work directly with teachers and students on the idea of, bringing creativity and technology into the classroom.
So to start us off, from your perspective as an educator, how is AI already changing the STEM career pathways students are preparing for? What kind of shifts are you seeing?
I think that's a great question. And the most honest answer is we don't know yet. I remind people all the time, the AI that we're working with today is the absolute worst version that you will ever work with moving forward, right? So we don't exactly know. I do know this. I know that some of our pathways, some of our computer-based pathways, we're starting to see a lot more interest in having certifications in the AI space. I've had more conversations with companies like Microsoft, Google, OpenAI about how we can bring up the knowledge base of this generation and make sure that they are getting the certifications that maybe they need or might be more valuable in this economy. But I think it's more about, and perhaps part of the reason we're seeing CTE so excited right now is that it's more about durable skills, and it's about building up those leadership qualities, building up that technical ability, building up that ability to fail forward through your learning. Because I think everybody, as you're going through this AI boom, is realizing that you have to be a lifelong learner. You have to be willing to understand that you don't know everything and work your way through problems. I think some of those durable skills are part and parcel to what we do in CTE and why there's some of the popularity that we're seeing. I'll also just mention that there are areas in which we maybe haven't thought about the power of computing really pushing in, and yet it is to an incredible degree. Things like welding, where we've got robotic welders that are now, they have to be part of the equipment that we have in our spaces. Things like the robotic arms that are doing concrete for automatically built houses, robotically built houses. So those are things that we have to keep an eye on, especially in the trades that even 5 years ago we thought, hey, maybe these are, you've even heard the term AI proof. I don't think anything is AI or computer proof at this point in time. And so it's just being open to the adaptability in those spaces and being willing to learn those new skills and transfer them to our young professionals.
Most of the times I go out and do keynotes or things like that, it's always talking about this idea of creativity in the age of AI. How has AI impacted this idea of embedding creativity in teaching and learning? And I think, people take it from a bunch of different angles. I think there are some people who are like, well, AI reduces creativity because now AI can do a lot of the things that we would often ask people to do. I myself, if you hand me a piece of paper and ask me to draw something, I will be like, I can't handle the blank piece of paper, right? So in many ways, technology has been an amplifier for me and my ability to be creative. And I think that now in this age of AI, creativity is not just still present, but even more important than ever, because when we talk about the things that AI can't do, AI is built on algorithms, and AI is not something that is necessarily producing original creative thought. And that's where this idea of creativity becomes so important, because we're really struggling as a profession in education about how do we tackle some of the main skills that we want students to have in order to be successful as they move up to the workplace. And I think we would argue that creativity is right there at the top in terms of the important skills we need to make sure that students have. The idea or the ability to have original thoughts and ideas, the ability to create on the fly, to improvise, to collaborate with others. All of this, and the research has shown time and time again the importance of creativity in the classroom. This is the great amplifier, the thing that's going to help us be successful given everything that's now kind of the new normal in classrooms.
It's so interesting kind of being in on the ground floor as an educator, watching all of these different components come together and just the moving parts of what career preparation looks like now that AI is a part of the equation. It's really cool that you're here today to help us understand that picture a little bit more clearly. As AI becomes embedded in STEM professions, what skills do you think that students are going to need most in order to thrive in a future STEM career? Maybe not even just technically, but also cognitively and socially.
Listen, I- it's a great question, and I think in order to thrive in this era, I think flexibility and adaptability and openness to change. You know, we as humans don't always love change, and yet now change is coming at us at a pace that we could have never predicted. And so, being comfortable with being a little uncomfortable, and understanding that what exists now is going to be different than maybe what we're used to in the future. But I also think too that take the health fields, for example. I mean, there's a lot of optimism in the AI space around what AI may be able to do in terms of helping solve medical mysteries, or sequencing things that we have not been able to sequence yet, and solve some of these complex medical issues. I think there's a lot of positivity around that. And so I think there's also a drive and a desire. The health medical space in our school was one of our top 3 requested programs in this latest application cycle. So, even though AI is in the news and pushing into those spaces in a professional capacity, I think there's still excitement around being a part of that. And so I think your question comes back to what skills do students need? They need to be flexible. They need to be open. They need to be ready to adapt with the times, and understand that their core skills, hardworking, communicating, working together, that's going to be what sustains them, especially in an AI in an AI world. I think the human relationship gains value. It doesn't reduce in value, and I'm excited that maybe we can help teach some of those skills.
Have you seen maybe some emerging trends on how AI is influencing careers that students might parlay into after high school? Maybe like, I guess AI influenced STEM roles that students might enter or future career pathways emerging. What have you seen with that?
It's interesting. I'm going to approach this question from 2 seats. One, in my role at Adobe, but 2 as a parent of, a son who is looking at colleges now and trying to decide what he wants to do. And I just went through this with my daughter 4 years ago when she was looking at colleges, and the process is so much different now because now I'm looking at all these different career pathways differently than I did when I did 4 years ago, right? When I did with her back in 2022, ChatGPT was just something we were all kind of hearing rumblings about. It really wasn't even, we didn't even know what it was. We were still like getting all those videos about like, this is what a large language model is, and trying to explain the basics to us, right? And now it's looking at things that we thought were sound career pathways for decades, that we've been telling students these are the safe choices to make when going to college, and having to evaluate everything. Like, there is literally, I said to my son the other day, he's super interested in like robotics and engineering. And you would think that I would be like, oh, you should totally go for that. And there's a part of me that's like, well, maybe you should do electrical engineering and you could always be an electrician if everything goes sideways, because we're still going to need those. And who knows what, you know, where AI is going to land in terms of what it could possibly do. Because the truth is, if you look at the marketplace right now, we see the reality is jobs are being replaced by AI. Like it was a theoretical exercise a year ago. And now we're actually seeing companies just straight up come out and be like, nope, we've increased AI automation and now we've replaced all these roles. And I find myself even sitting in in the morning sometimes thinking like, can AI do what I do? What am I bringing to the table that can't be brought through automation or through, an algorithm basically? And so I think the entire process is different. The way we look at careers, the way we look at what the workforce will be like. And to be fair, 10 years ago, we were having these same conversations about like, we have no idea what jobs there will be in the future. And I feel like we've always said things like that. Now it's gone, like I said before, a little from theoretical to more, it's like right in our face now. So there's no question that it's constantly evolving. There are no real answers for like where we're going to land or where the right pathways are necessarily. But I think then you have to take a step backwards and look at what skills are we looking for in our students. And to your initial question, even with my own kids, I do encourage them to use the tools at their disposal. I do encourage them to, like, I feel like we used to say to our kids, well, did you try Googling that? Or you might remember the website, let me Google that for you. I feel like I'm like, well, did you ask AI? And even just now, simple life problem. My dog has not eaten in like 2.5 days because he will not eat the kibble. Like just won't eat it. Would choose to starve over eating the kibble. And I'm like, I can go to the store and ask like a salesperson who's probably still in high school, who probably doesn't even know, and is just going to tell me whatever bag. And I'm like, you know what? I should just ask AI to be like, well, here's the situation. Here's a picture of the bag of what he's eating. What would you make a recommendation on for us to try? Bought a bag, brought it home. He ate a bowl of food. So it's like, it's more of the shifting our mindset for how we attack life problems. And I know we're talking about careers, but I think it's the same thing. When you embed that skill as something you would just do in the norm or think about it as part of your process, it's more likely to translate over to what you're going to be doing when you're actually doing work, for any job. And so I know that when we talk to people who are applying for jobs, I definitely want to understand whether they are able to not be replaced by AI, obviously, but like whether they understand how to use tools to their benefit, right? To be more efficient, to be able to storytell even more effectively. And I think that's the part where there's this nice creativity overlap with AI, right? It actually helps bring the story out when we kind of ask for refinement or ask for an analogy or ask for a better way to convey information to other people. And that's where I think it could be used as like a partnership tool, not as a replacement tool, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And just to sort of add on a little bit, I'm just curious, we were talking about these skills and you were talking about like what you're talking about, like with your son. Are you having some of these conversations in your role as an evangelist with teachers about what skills might really need to be focused on in this age of AI through your work with Adobe?
Oh, 100%. I think that's where, even as I said before, like a lot of the talks I do are around this idea of creativity in the age of AI and where the benefits are for injecting creativity into the work we do in our classrooms. And Jessica, you've heard this a million times probably from me or members of my team, but like, the studies show that creativity does a lot of things for teachers and students in the classroom. Not only do students feel like they should have opportunities to be creative in the classroom, but when teachers are able to provide those opportunities, it actually does things like reduce teacher burnout, empowers teachers through new ways to improve teaching and learning outcomes. So there's all these different benefits that the research has shown that creativity on its own has. But then when you pair up creativity with AI, and I'll give you a great example, one of my favorite examples is like a creative writing example, where sometimes when students are first kind of developing their writing skills, in their head, they think that what they're writing conveys something differently than how the reader might interpret it. And so one thing we love is I can take the first sentence of a story and put it into like in Adobe Express, and have it generate the image of what's the image that's being conveyed by this. And now they realize, oh, you know what? Maybe I wasn't being descriptive enough. Maybe I need to add more adjectives. Maybe I need to flesh out that example more. And so now you're taking something that used to be an exercise conducted on paper and pen and in my own mind, and actually getting to visualize that in a new way that's enhancing the outcome of the work that I'm doing. So that's an example of using it as a tool, not as a replacement vehicle, but as a way to pair and enhance what those teaching and learning outcomes are.
Many AI-influenced STEM roles students may enter in the future are still emerging. How are you helping your students prepare for careers that are like evolving faster than the curriculum?
Well, so I think like most change processes, I'm going to let my high flyers fly high. And if they want to bring in new tools, if they want to experiment, if they want to work with some experts in the field that might have interest in those areas or expertise in those areas, I'm going to find a way to say yes to those folks and let them push their boundaries to their comfort level. I think one of the things that can be tempting as a leader is to try to do sort of a full scale push into some of those spaces. And I think that we should always be willing to test our comfort zones, but I also don't want to push anybody who's really uncomfortable to implement something that may throw off their pedagogical stride. And remember too, that in the CTE space, my folks are coming to this as a second career for the most part. So they were already practitioners as a welder, as a cosmetologist, as an electrician, carpenter, dental assistant, nurse, right? So there's so many different fields that because they're coming to this as a second career, I want their pedagogical strategies to be really, really strong before they start to really disrupt their systems. And I mean that in a supportive way, because certainly, like I said before, if you're an early adopter and you want to try things out, I'm all for making sure that you have the runway to do that. But I want to make sure that we're doing those things thoughtfully and not just jumping on to something that's new and shiny. I think in the AI space right now, there's a lot of just tagging AI onto products and onto things that is a perceived value add. But if it's not an actual value add, then it's just a shiny object. And so I'm not as interested in that. So I want to make sure that there's a strong pedagogical, foothold there for my folks, especially as second career educators. And then I want them to really experiment and push and try things out and see what, what their students have an interest in learning and growing in as well, because we have this dedicated time. We're with our students 2.5 hours a day. We have them for half a day, every day, all year. And so that gives us a little bit of freedom to try some of those new and exciting things, or maybe let a student pursue a passion project that maybe in a classic K-12 space, you may not have had the time or the ability to infuse into their learning.
How has the rise of AI sort of changed the way not only that you're approaching STEM instruction, but also projects and assessments in your program in order to, maybe better align with the realities of modern STEM careers?
So I'm going to say this. I think I'm excited to see as we continue to implement and renew equipment in our spaces, to see what some of our equipment providers, I talked about robotic welders before. I talked a little bit about some of those robotic construction pieces of equipment. We don't have a robotic piece of construction equipment yet. We do have the robotic welders. We're seeing some in the sort of CNC space, a little more infusion of that technology. So I'm excited to see what the manufacturers of the pieces of equipment start to see as major efficiencies for their pieces of equipment. Maybe it's a more of a vibe coding style of putting code into equipment. I'm thinking like CNC mills or that sort of a thing. And the nice part too is that we run a refresh cycle in our school every 5 years. We're taking a dedicated look at all of the equipment in a program area. And so the hope is to see more equipment pieces. And then from there, right, you have to build up your knowledge base as the instructor and get trained on that piece of equipment, and then make sure that your students can learn on that. So that's one part of it. But I'm also going to look at it from the supervisor lens as the leader of the organization, that some of these tools for educators, I talked about my teachers being second career. So some of the tools that are out there are really sharp tools to make that transition into teaching a little more achievable. Certainly not easier. Teaching is an incredibly difficult job to have, but to have school AI, Magic School, some of these tools that break down that LLM into easy to grab models that our teachers can implement. And then some of our, SMS or SIS systems that have some of these AI pieces encoded into them, that's making that work a little more achievable. And it's not all on the educator to have to put every word, every thought, every idea down. They can have the mastery knowledge, communicate that mastery knowledge into this LLM. Then the LLM can help them craft, whether it's going to be their lesson plan or their quiz or their check for understanding or their exit ticket. As my teachers are learning those pedagogical strategies, these pieces of technology are really doing a nice job of bridging where there might have been gaps previously. So I think I see it from both sides. I see it from the implementation side of teaching these STEM careers, but also the teachers of these STEM careers. And there's AI and useful tools across both platforms for sure.
AI-driven STEM careers increasingly require communication, ethics, collaboration, systems thinking, alongside technical expertise. And you've spoken about this a bit, but how are you helping students develop that broader interdisciplinary readiness? What kind of things are you doing at your school?
Well, I'm going to say this. I'll make the argument. I'm a classic K-12 educator by trade. So I went to college for education, became an English teacher, was an assistant principal in a classic K-12 space, and then moved into career and technical education. And I can tell you, as an English teacher, what I was always chasing was authentic learning and authentic assessment. What I was trying to implement was problem and project-based learning. I saw the value in problem and project-based learning, but I, as a young educator, struggled to implement those items with fidelity. And so then I come to CTE. And when I come to CTE, the classroom is broken up, generally speaking, into two parts: theory and then practice. And, you can call it hands-on. I prefer learning by doing, but there's the theory side, and then there's the learning by doing side. And that was the piece that I found in my classic K-12 spaces, that we were always trying to get to the learning by doing and making that learning stick and make it authentic. But it was a lot of pretend. In my English class, we would pretend. I would say, act as if you are a magazine editor. How might you write, an article about the story that we read? That's pretend. Whereas in the CTE space, it's practice. So it's the vehicle has a check engine light. And this is the example that I give often. The vehicle has a check engine light. We don't know why the check engine light is on. We have to understand the problem, right? We have to diagnose the problem. But once we diagnose it, that's not the end of it, because maybe what's broken or not working is a skill we haven't learned yet. So now we have to either backfill and learn that skill, or go teach ourselves that skill, or get educated by our instructor on that skill. Then we have to implement the solution. Then it has to work, and we have to test it for accuracy. And then we have to deliver it to a client. And those brakes on that vehicle have to work and have to be safe. Now, our students are doing this under the supervision of our tremendous, talented instructors. And so I trust that not only are they doing the work, but they're having their work checked. And we're making sure that the students are working towards repeatable accuracy and able to do these things, frequently and without error. But that's problem-based learning. And so you asked about interdisciplinary learning and you asked about team building. You know, when you're a sports therapy student at our school and you learn about healthy eating habits, you're doing that in the culinary classroom with the culinary students who are learning with you about healthy physical habits because you're a sports med student and they're a culinary student, right? When your public safety students are learning about their physical fitness, they're coming to the sports med classroom using the gym equipment under the supervision of our students who have learned in the sports med classroom how to use that equipment and how to make sure it's being done safely and not overstraining different parts of your body. And now they're educating each other right within our different spaces. Our carpentry construction students learning from our sports med students, like that's a really solid example of how we cross over all of the time. We have a philanthropy club. They just renovated a family space in our local courthouse. Well, they worked with our early childhood education students to make sure that what they were putting in that space was age appropriate for the target area of that. So it's not just let's make this look pretty. It's let's make this appropriate for the age groups that it's going to be serving. And that's the type of interdisciplinary work that you get to do in a career tech center. And again, I come back to it. That's not pretend. That's practice. And that's, I think, a big difference. So I might have answered your question. I might have just taken us on a long walk, but hopefully it was fun either way.
Now, I think that's an excellent analogy for those of us who maybe aren't as in the CTE wheelhouse, just to understand, exactly what the goal is of being part of the CTE program. So thank you for that analogy. That actually works really well for my mind. AI has the potential to create lots of opportunity, but it also could widen existing challenges in STEM access and career preparation. I'm wondering if you could share any concerns that you might have about students being left behind or what schools can do to kind of make sure that that doesn't occur.
So I'm smiling because I don't think we've ever had a nice rollout of anything across the board. So like insert whatever you want there, and there's never been in education a smooth, seamless rollout of pretty much anything. As far as the equity piece go, yeah, I mean, I definitely have concerns when it comes to AI. And what's interesting, if you think back to when ChatGPT first came on the scene and students started to get access through even personal devices, you may remember like New York City schools banned ChatGPT outright. And I think they quickly realized that they were creating an equity issue by banning, like, because certain students were going to have access on their personal devices. So those who did not have their own devices would not have access. Even as we start to provide access, there's a different type of inequity starting to happen, right? Because as students are starting to use it more and kind of learn, and by the way, most students we talk to say that they use AI in some form, even though many have like kind of mixed feelings about it, if not just negative feelings outright. So it is not like it's not like with Google or something where it was like everyone universally was like, yes, this is, or students were like, yes, we want Google. Teachers, we were like, don't Google anything. But I'm also old enough that we were like, don't let kids use calculators because then they could solve math problems and they'll never learn math. So this has been a consistent challenge with adopting technology. The difference here now is as we're kind of moving up the adoption chain, we're running into this issue of like access through tokens, right? So like I may have access to the tool, but not to the degree I need it, or I don't have the superpowered version that's going to be able to really do all the things I'm going to need to do. And the challenge on the educator side is how are they developing work and projects that aren't AI-able, right? We can't just go in there and be like, write the paper. And I'm sorry, quick tangent. I should mention, I'm a doctoral student. I'm a doctoral candidate now. So I just defended my dissertation proposal. So I'm working on my dissertation. My wife completed her dissertation last year. What I have access to compared to what she had access to a year ago is the difference in 1 year is wild. Like, I don't know how people did doctoral work with no access to AI. And I'm not talking about writing your dissertation. I'm just talking about even like check this over, let me know what's not consistent, basically using it as a partner in the editing process, as a thought partner. And hopefully students are starting to get that, to land there. But like you kind of alluded to, it's not happening in a consistent way or with the same consistent set of resources. And so, yeah, that's always going to be a challenge. And I think that's why we can't kind of bury our head in the sand and be like, we're not talking about AI. We have to attack this problem head on by providing resources, by providing ways to use it. I know on the Adobe side, in Adobe Express, as an example, we have like guided activities, which kind of provide step-by-step instructions to how you would like modify an image using our image generation tool, trying to provide scaffolding so that the teachers who wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with the tool feel like they are empowered enough to provide students with those opportunities and access to do that type of work in class. Because, you know, creativity feels like a fluffy word sometimes. I think some people are like, oh, that's not, I was a math teacher. So I think if you were to say 20 years ago, you know, you need to be creative in your math class, I'm like, no, this is not, we're studying for the test. We have to do well on the test. We have to, you know, we have to be successful there. And that's how we measure success. Because some people feel like creativity is something for certain spaces and not others. And I think that's why we're trying to break that down to show, no, by providing those creative spaces, you're also providing those opportunities to bring them up to speed on kind of what AI tools and resources they have available to them, and how to use them in a way that is going to be productive rather than a replacement for the learning that would normally happen in the work.
Incredible question, and timely and important. So I think access and equity are the things that come to mind immediately, and making sure that if we're going to deeply embed these things into our learning, that all of our students can access those tools. So I think that's part number one. I'll also just throw a little caveat out there that we're also seeing the price of the equipment, the computers, the chips that we need going up at a rate that we're not used to, and that's hitting budgets at exactly the wrong time. And so we're going to have to be careful and thoughtful about that moving forward. But I also have to tell you that I'm concerned and have had conversations with some of the companies I mentioned before, because education, although CTE, I would argue, moves pretty quickly, education is not known for adapting quickly. I'm gonna guess, I think I heard you say, Jessica, that you had state testing today. And so did you have to return paper and pencil tests back to the test administrator today, probably?
Not paper and pencil. We have the
good.
tested self-digitized, but we still have scratch paper and, you know, the testing directions that get printed out and other secure materials that have to end up back in the office.
So still an analog, while digital,
Yes.
partially analog, right?
Yes.
And so I think, you know, I asked that through the lens that, you know, it's not just the access and the equity, but it's also then, you know, making sure that everybody knows how to use that equipment, right? But I was telling you, I was talking with some of these companies, and my concern is, I was saying education moves slowly. So some of our programs are things like web design or things like network operating, right? So system security, cybersecurity. And so as AI is infused into those spaces, what used to be a coding task, a long and laborious task of say web design, we all know now that can be coded relatively quickly, you know, using AI. So it's going to be adapting those programs. I certainly don't want to see those programs, labs, students, you know, taken out of our school. So how do we adapt those programs? How do we adapt a cybersecurity program that we know is going to be heavily AI driven in a few years? And so that's the conversation I'm hoping to have with some of these bigger companies, so that they can infuse into us what they need for their pipeline of employees moving forward, so that we can make those really adaptable employees that they need. Because we know that the humans are going to need to still be part of the equation, whether they're building these data centers, whether they're serving or maintaining these data centers, whether they're repairing in some of these advanced manufacturing facilities. Sure, automation is going to continue to increase, but the human element is certainly still going to be there. And so I really would love for some of these AI centric companies to be investing in the pipeline, especially of the workforce that they're going to be relying on at some point down the line, and making sure that they're contributing to that space. Because I don't think that I think education is going to need a little bit of support as we have to adapt there, because we're going to have to adapt faster than we're typically used to. Normally, education adapts at a glacial pace. We're going to have to be slightly faster than that within the AI era.
Um, so as we kind of get ready to wrap up, what's something you're like seeing maybe down the line 6 to 8 months that you're excited about around, AI and the work you're doing with being, creativity evangelists? What's something that's getting you excited?
Oh, I have something. I really I was like, oh, I didn't know if this was gonna be a tough question. So one of the things we're working on now, we just launched something called Student Spaces, which is a student-facing product which allows students to, and I'm gonna use a college example here, but I was talking to my daughter, like she's, has 4 or 5 different classes that she's trying to manage the work for and prep for. And I always say it's not as simple as just studying. There's almost the planning that has to happen before studying, right? I have to map out a whole plan. It's like the planning to study before you even study. And what I love about this Student Spaces is it's a place where you can add all of your course content, anything from transcripts from the lecture, presentations, notes, textbooks, whatever you have access to. And you could start to create that plan. I could say, you know what? Let's say geology. We're studying fossils and I'm having a test on fossils next Thursday. So I'm going to create a study packet. And what it'll do is I'll tell it, you have 7 days to study. It'll create a 7-day plan, chunked out. Each day will culminate with a quiz and flashcards, depending on which resource you like to use to study and prep. And so now it's developing that not from some weird AI space, but like it's reducing those possible hallucinations because it's basically just sourcing it directly from the content you've provided it. And the thing I love about it is it's a collaborative space as well. I can invite my classmates in and they could add their content. So how many times growing up did you feel like I'd go study with my friends and I'm a terrible note taker and my handwriting's so bad that if I wrote something down right now and 10 seconds later looked down at it, I'd be like, I don't know what I just wrote. And I would go in and see my friends with these like amazing notes and they'd be like, oh my God, they have all these. So everyone could pull all their content together. And when it provides you with information, it'll provide you with a citation that goes right back to where it got that information from. So it's a trusted source that students could be like, this is not some AI hallucination. This is the stuff you have provided, but now it's like the virtual version of the study group. And so I can share some stuff I learned today about what's coming down in that like 6-month timeline, but I was so pumped up. This is one of my favorite new things to come along in a while. It's free for students to check out. So it's called Adobe Student Spaces. But even working with faculty, I love it as well because I can now create a space for my students using content that I have that allows them to go in and ask the AI assistant or develop their own resource for studying. And I could see what other resources people have created. So it's a real collaborative way of learning together and taking advantage of the technology rather than using it as like the crutch or the replacement for learning. So I just think one of the things I've loved about this experience of creating student spaces is we've done this in partnership with students. We had over 400 students providing input into the development of the tool. And I think in this age of AI, and we're talking about creating things that we want students to be using, having them have agency and seats at the table to be able to talk about what they need and for us to really be there listening and being like, we're going to create the tool that you are asking for. That makes me feel to a certain degree. I reserve the title of teacher for those who are in the classroom and are earning the badge every day, but it's the closest I can get to feeling that besides, my adjunct work or stuff like that. Just like feeling like I'm actually serving students in a way that feels deeply meaningful.
What sort of things are on your radar around STEM education and AI?
So twofold. I'm thinking about efficiencies within the organization. So through the administrative lens, I'm really thinking about how we can get some efficiencies across the organization, right? So some of these tasks that, require a lot of human interaction, that is a lot of calculating or a lot of potential for human error, whether it's, mean, think about in education, like even just your salary matrix, every year having to go through, making sure that everybody's moved to the right column, using that predictive technology to make sure that you're budgeting enough for your salary in the budget for next year. I think there's some efficiencies there that we can gain within just the administrative lens. We're piloting with so there's a district in Minnesota that has an AI evaluation tool for teachers, observation tool. And so using a camera and a microphone system to not replace the human, but to assist the human, number one, but also be a coach for the teacher. So imagine deploying a camera that could give you Danielson feedback anytime that you would want it. That's an interesting piece of technology that we're piloting right now. So we're looking at those efficiency level things at the administrative side. On the other side, I think it's really being open-minded and paying attention to what's happening in our technical areas and where we see those technical areas needing support or growth in the AI space. I'm thinking right now, specifically what's coming to mind is like public safety. So the world of public safety, we don't have to sort of have commentary on whether we agree or disagree, but there's a lot more AI in the world of public safety, whether it is through flock cameras that are keeping an eye on, what license plates are going, where they are and what's happening, and keeping trends on those sorts of things, whether it's crowd control and using AI, informed cameras to keep an eye on crowds and what's happening in those spaces, there's just so much in the public safety space that I'm curious to see what we can infuse there. That's one that's got my attention right now. And then beyond that, I think there's sort of just a full scale. I could look at any program at any time. I'm thinking medical, I'm thinking dental, I'm thinking we have a graphic arts program that's like a commercial art style program. There's a lot of opportunity to push the boundaries of what we've done before and see how far we can go. So I'm going to be looking across all of our spaces to see, where we need to be paying attention, getting more training, writing more grants, and making sure that we can fund, the next phase of whichever program or programs it might be.
Thank you so much for your time. This has been a great conversation today. Where could listeners get a hold of you if they wanted to continue this conversation?
Sure. So I'm the proud director at Middlebucks Institute of Technology. mbit.org is our school website. Great place to find me there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And so if you want to connect, find me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to continue this conversation.
Sure. I'm at Jay Lubinsky on the socials, JLUBINSKY. My website's jesselubinsky.com. And I have a podcast it's an education podcast called Partial Credit that I co-host with Donnie Piercy, who was the 2021 Kentucky Teacher of the Year, and Jeffrey Heil, who was not Teacher of the Year. He's from San Diego, though. He's chilling.
And everyone should definitely go give it a listen for sure. Thank you again, Jesse, for joining us today. We have certainly gotten a lot of great food for thought.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of AI in education. This podcast series has been brought to you by the Utah STEM Action Center and STEM Connector. If today's conversation sparked ideas, questions, or curiosity, we've got more for you. Head over to our podcast portal for extended learning at aistemcast.com.
You'll find curated resources, classroom-ready tools, and ways to dive deeper into each episode's topic. We're building a community of educators who are ready to explore what's possible with AI, and we'd love for you to be a part of it.
Until next time, keep learning, stay curious, and don't be afraid to dive into something new.